this meeting, as usual, is being filmed, is this, and recorded as well. Okay. So, agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Have we got any apologies?
Apologies for absence, Chair, have been received from Mark Dalton, Councillor Susan Hinchcliffe, Councillor Alan Lamb, Mark Outersider, Councillor Cathy Scott and Councillor Jane Scullion.
Thank you, but we are quorate today, so yeah, which is good. Okay, agenda item 2, declarations of interest from anybody? No? Okay, we have no declarations of interest. Agenda item 3 is matters which require the exclusion of the press or public. There is one matter which is detailed in the agenda where officers have recommended the public be excluded from the meeting. That relates to conversations on Appendix 2, agenda item 11. So can I ask members to accept the recommendation that this matter is exempt? Is that all right? Yeah, thank you. So that's agreed. Okay, agenda item 4. We've got the minutes to agree from the 16th of October. We couldn't do it at the last meeting because we weren't quorate. So could I ask if anyone's got any comments, questions first? No? So do members agree that they're an accurate reflection of the meeting? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 5 is logged as the minutes of the last meeting held on the 11th of January, but that's a slight error. The meeting was in quorate last time, so we had an informal discussion around this. And so the minutes have been withdrawn and the meeting has been noted on the website rather than having minutes to approve today. Okay, so there's nothing further to do on that particular agenda item. Right, agenda item 6 is the progress on internal audit, and I think that's for Bron to take us through. I'm delighted to see that you now have all your vacancies filled, which is really positive news.
Thank you, Chair. It is. And as a result of that, we're feeling very confident that we will certainly get enough work done to have an unlimited by scope opinion this year. So we've been on the slight edge of that all year, and we're very happy to be in a much stronger position now. That said, I did talk at the previous meeting about a business case that we were developing to look at resource to take us forward. You'll note from the papers that we are continuing to see referrals around counter-fraud and whistleblowing, which continue to rise. That does soak up quite a lot of resource. So the business case that we've been preparing has reflected both what we believe we need in terms of resource to deliver the plan for next year, but also to look at succession and what we do in terms of growing our own for the future. And I think I said last time we were looking to build some apprenticeships into that plan, which is currently under review by the senior leaders in the office. So we hope to have some further news for you at the next committee meeting on that. We have got 5 reports that we've closed since the last committee. We've put summaries in the paper for the committee to consider. One of those was a minimal assurance report. We have had some feedback from management in response to the recommendations in that report, and we believe it would be useful for one of that team to come and present to the next committee in terms of making progress against those recommendations. Because at this point we believe it's really imperative that they're actioned in a timely way. So if the committee is happy to endorse that request for attendance, that would be helpful. That's all I was going to raise specifically, but I'm very happy to take questions and answer anything where members would like further information.
Any questions?
Thank you, Chair. Really good news about the recruitment. I suppose the question is, if your business case is rejected, what are the implications of that? Retention as well. We know it's a very, very difficult jobs market in internal audit. Everybody's trying to recruit. What retention arrangements have you got in place to keep the ones you've recruited? Do you pay for training, CPD, subscriptions to the relevant membership bodies, etc.?
All good questions, all reflected in our business case. You'll be happy to know. I mean, we have talked with the team quite extensively about what they would find attractive about the roles. We've managed to recruit some really good people. We are very keen to keep them, and I think that is absolutely the right emphasis. So we're trying to make sure we're doing a lot of things. We've built into the business case things that we can do around things like absolutely subscription, CPD, all of that kind of stuff, but along with that, making sure that there's good succession within that structure so that people can actually see a career opportunity within the CA going forward. And we believe that is going to strengthen our position in terms of keeping the good ones that we've got. We don't want to lose them. So I think it's about balance around all of it, but individually, I think those things that you mentioned, the package things, do matter. And we are seeing actually a lot of changes in what you'll know, Joe, from the Government Audit Agency and others in government. They are trying to enhance the package for auditors now, so that's why we've built it into the business case. So hopefully we're on the front foot with all of that.
Sorry, one more question. You talked about the fraud referrals increasing, that your team undertake those investigations. Is there anybody on the team who's got counter-fraud qualification? And what happens when an investigation reaches the stage where you would need to be considering interviewing and PACE requirements?
Another good question. So we do have somebody who has investigation experience, and we're looking at potential qualification route for them through an apprenticeship. We're also in the business case looking to bring in an apprentice to grow our own for the future, so we can bring them in, train them, and then give them lots of experience, which unfortunately we do seem able to provide at the moment. So while ever we don't have anybody who's qualified at the moment, we absolutely understand the necessity to make that the case going forward. But just to make the committee aware, I am talking to colleagues in other MCAs about the potential for us looking at some shared resource around counter-fraud, because I think with the best will in the world, all of us in combined authorities need to have some presence in the organisation around fraud, but we're not really running the level and detail of investigations that allow you to invest in the tools, the specialist equipment that you need, you know, soundproofed interview rooms, all the qualified PACE stuff for the staff to be able to interview under caution. All of that comes at a huge cost, and I'm not sure we can justify that in terms of the type of cases that we get in the main. But you're right, we do have the odd case that really requires that, and at the moment we're looking at what are the options across all of us in terms of how we access that. So we're looking at potentially whether there's a call of contract we could institute across the MCAs so that we can all access some specialist support without it costing individual CAs an arm and a leg to do a really thorough investigation. We're also having a conversation with the Serious Fraud Office, really just to understand what they can do and what they can't do. And we're also going to institute a conversation with the Government Audit Agency to see whether their fraud team could help us out or possibly would be interested in a call of contract. So we've got lots of things that we're kind of thinking about and trying to get in hand, because you've seen the growth through the papers over the last number of committees, the growth in terms of referrals. And we're just getting to the point now where some of them are getting quite big, and really they outweigh the capacity and skill sets that we've got in-house.
I've got a few as well for you, sorry, Bron. So fraud whistleblowing, the case numbers are going up. And that's really good, because I suppose it shows the system's working if people feel they can come forward and they are doing and they're getting investigated. But I just wondered what measures are being put in place, or if there are any measures in place, to look at synergies across those cases to see if there's some sort of endemic problem within the system.
So we do analyse the types of cases that are coming in, and we can definitely see some trends and themes around where they're originating from. So you will recall at the last committee we asked the head of the adult skills team to come in and talk about a minimal assurance report we'd had with one of their providers. It's fair to say that the adult skills world has more issues of this kind, and we are seeing that coming to the fore in terms of the kind of referrals that we're getting. We also see a number of referrals through some of our support to businesses. Unsurprising, really, when you think about it. It's where you would expect the fraud to come out of. We do recognise, and this is absolutely why we're building a business case around resources, we recognise we need to do more prevention work. We really need to be giving all of the teams, the different teams that have those kind of interactions, the same tools, understanding and awareness of what to do about not just detecting the fraud, but building in the controls to prevent them. So we've not had any losses yet as a result of proven fraud. We have one case where potentially we may end up with a small loss, but I do mean a small loss. So it's not been driven from a financial perspective. I think it's much more about the efficiencies and making sure that we're not exposed to that, and that subsequently we don't have something of magnitude that would be a reputational and financial risk to the organisation. So I think there's more to do. I think we just need the resource to be able to do it.
Thank you. My next one's around the climate change report. So in there it said that there was a lack of visibility over who's reporting to who. So I had in mind, we talked once before briefly about an assurance matrix. Would that be picked up in that, or has it been?
Not specifically, but it absolutely could be, and that's another piece of work where we are wanting to do a bit more on the kind of prevention of control issues, etc., with the organisation as a whole, to look at more not assurance maps per se, but just that understanding of the assurances and where they feed in, etc. So we did actually have quite a lengthy discussion with the director who's got responsibility for this, and we talked about some of the things that could be built in, because what we were identifying was not that there was not assurance and not reporting to different, it was how well they were talking to each other and how well they were cited on what else was going on. So they're going to do quite a lot of work around building that picture. And it's right that it sits in the business to do that. It's not something Audit should go and do to them. They should build that understanding for themselves. So whatever it was, the limited assurance is the right opinion for that piece of work, we were very positively reassured at the response we got to that, because we had such good discussions with the director there about what she could do to put this in place and take that forward. And she was very open to the advice that we were able to offer in relation to that. So again, we should bring that back to a future meeting and perhaps ask that team to come and talk about what they've done, because it is such a big issue for the CA.
Thank you. Adult education. Sorry, we've got two reports on there. You've got a review 9 and a review 7. I was trying to work out what the difference in the area of focus was between them, because one had a reasonable assurance and one had minimal. One's described as funding and performance, and the other says finance and outcomes, and those, in my mind, are almost the same things. So I just wondered where the difference laid.
So it depends entirely on the provider. So in terms of the adult skills world, we deal with a really varied provider base. So in terms of what we're looking at their controls across the board, whether they be financial, whether they be about the learner experience, etc. So it can be minimal or reasonable or limited assurance depending on where we pick up the issues with that particular provider. I think I've already alluded to the fact that it is a very interesting world. And you do get huge variation from local small providers versus your national big providers that are doing things on a much bigger scale. So I think the risk will depend entirely on the nature of the provider that you're dealing with Does that make sense? Does that answer
That
the
makes
question?
complete sense. It's maybe just worth putting something in the notes because they do look very similar on paper if you haven't got that context. So just the clarity, that would be good. And my final one is around transport. So we've got a lot of actions outstanding, and I think an increasing number, if I'm right, from the last meeting. So I just really wondered what's happening in that area, what action's being taken. Can we get some insight around that about the actions?
Yeah, so I think you're right. It has gone up because, of course, we've completed a couple of reports in that area of the business. What I would say is that the production of the papers has engendered a lot of interest in what is happening with the recommendations. And since we actually published the papers, we've since had updates from that team who have gone through all of the outstanding recommendations across the reports to give an update to us. And that number is going to go down quite significantly. A number of those have been closed. Lots of it predicated on the work that on the outcome of the new system that they've put in place, which was going to address a lot of the control issues from the previous report. So we've had a lot of feedback to show lots of positive progress, but we are just starting the follow-up work to go and evidence that. So I think I'm going to keep my powder dry until the next meeting and then give you a confident position on whether those recommendations we believe have been fully met and we're confident they're doing the right things. And I think it's important that we do have somebody from that directorate back to speak to the committee next time, and I think it would be appropriate for them to talk about progress against the recommendations.
That'd be good, thank you. Any other questions, Joanna?
Sorry, me again. Just in relation to the overdue recommendations, for me personally, I don't know about the rest of the committee, it would be helpful to see an aged assessment. How overdue are we talking? Is it a month, 6 months, longer? Just so we got some understanding of how long the risk that you or weakness you identified it hasn't been addressed. Thank you.
Obviously, we don't have that in the paper currently, but we can supply that if the committee would find that helpful. It's not difficult for us to pull that information together.
Yeah, I think that would be useful. Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to agenda item 7, and that's the internal audit plan. And it's actually to ask members to approve the internal audit plan. So, Bron, do you want to take us through anything there?
So the plan we brought to the committee in January, it's not changed in terms of what you saw then. We have and are having further discussions with the business just to make sure that when it comes to looking at the scope of particular issues within the plan, that we're narrowing that down. We will continue to do that throughout the course of the year. And I think just picking up earlier points about the nature of the plan and the breadth of the plan, I believe it's the right plan. I firmly believe it's the right plan. I think, though, we do need to resolve the issue on the business case in terms of resource to deliver that plan. And I think I put in the paper that if we don't have the right resource to deliver it, we will need to revisit it and we will need to bring it back to GAC. But other than that, it is not different from what the committee discussed at the January meeting, which I know we weren't quorate, but we are today, so that's helpful.
Thank you. Any questions? No. Can I ask if members endorse the plan? Yeah, thank you. So note that's been approved. Right, agenda item 8, that's the update on the progress of external audit. And there's quite a lot to digest within the paper I've found. So although I think members may have read the papers as I have, I'm keen to ensure that we're really aware and informed on the key matters within them. So especially things which will impact the work of this committee. So Angela, could you take us through it, and then maybe with some contribution from Azaz as well?
I will, Chair, thank you. So starting at the top, going back to the 21-22 accounts, just a reminder that they were signed off at the end of last year. The final piece of work is value for money conclusion, where we had an initial plan to try and get that done by the end of March. There's work underway now. We are that work is still in progress at an early stage. So the value for money work, we should be able to report that back to the next meeting formally, but we would if it should be concluded well before the next meeting, which won't be till June or July. So I think we've agreed when it's completed, we'll share it with the committee outside of the cycle of meetings, so you can be reassured that of the conclusion of that work, and depending what that conclusion is, whether you want to have any further discussions with us or not. And Alice is nodding because I think that is what we talked about.
Yeah, if I can just on that point, it's helpful doing this as a double act, isn't it? That's absolutely right. The work is, I wouldn't say it's at an early stage, it's well advanced, and I had a conversation with Mark, my senior manager, who's still confident that end of March is deliverable and achievable. He's got a call tomorrow. There are some bits of evidence we're waiting for in order to give us the confirmation of the arrangements that the Combined Authority has in place, and that should be achievable by the end of the month. So we'd circulate that to Angela, she'd circulate it around you, and I'll make the offer if anyone wants a side conversation, appreciating that your next meeting isn't for some months, then more than happy to do that.
So that was the straightforward bit. We then move into the complex world of the backlog consultation on 22-23 and soon to be 23-24 accounts. So when we last met, we advised, I think most members are aware through this committee or arrangements at their own authority, that we know there is a challenge in the system and there is a backlog in the local audit world. And when we met last time in January, we were awaiting a consultation coming out. That consultation has come out subsequently, and it is open to, it closes today. It ended up being more than one consultation because of the different strands of the organisations and their interests in it. So there is DLUC, there's National Audit Office, and these ones start to get techie about what are some of the practical things that could be done to help reduce the workload. I think the real challenge in all of this is none of the solutions being put forward suddenly gives more resource to the external audit world. Mazars have the same number of people they had before and after this consultation. What it is hoping to achieve is there's a set of backstop dates, which I'll point you to in a moment, which is in the appendix. It gives a timescale by which audits must be finished, and there is clearly a piece of work to be done between auditor and auditees to determine how we manage to those backstop dates, bearing in mind where we're up to in the cycle of audits, the availability of audit resource, the challenge of if you don't do one set of accounts, if one set of accounts is not fully audited, how does that impact on the following year? So how do we try to square this into a better place? The consultation proposes a set of backstop dates, which is in Appendix 1. There are a lot of papers. We thought rather than try to pull out the bits that might be of interest, we put it all in there for you. But the interesting one is on, I think, page 50 something of the first appendix. I will find it again. There's a little table that shows the backstop dates, page 55 of the pack. So there is a backstop date of September 24 for the 22-23 accounts. Whatever happens, we will have to conclude together the work on the 22-23 accounts, come what may. And obviously, Mazars are balancing that across all their audit clients. And so there are discussions underway with all the relevant parties. But that is the proposal. There is then a sliding scale for future years audits. So March 24 has a backstop date of March 25, and then it eventually comes back in line to where we wanted it to be in the first place. I think one of the helpful things in here is the value for money, which is proposed that the value for money opinion, irrespective of these dates, will be done in November. And I think in the current climate, that's probably something to welcome, that VFM work will happen, and there will be a formal opinion on that, even without the statutory accounts being concluded by the same date. And obviously that will vary between different organisations. When we talked last time, I know there was interest about should we respond to the consultation. I think we needed to see what it looked like. I think the issue that the committee was particularly concerned about was that there was a plan to try and get back on track, and there is one. And I think it's extremely difficult to come up with any proposal. So there is something here that I think the various parties in the industry are hoping will work. I think there was also some concern about I might rephrase that. We'd acknowledged the increase in audit fee. I think the committee recognised why audit fees were needing to increase, but it came at an uncomfortable time of public sector funding challenges and a point where audits may not be fully complete, and a question about whether the audit fees would be adjusted accordingly. There is a statement from Public Sector Audit Appointments, PSAA, saying that they will very much look at that, but I think to just highlight that even if we don't get, and we may be in a world where our 22-23 audit is not underway, we've only just published accounts, if they do not get finished by the end of September, that may not be for want of a lot of work going in by auditors. So the lack of a full audit opinion may still result in a good chunk of audit fee being payable depending on what work gets done. So I don't think there's a straight line correlation. We were expecting to append the proposed response. The mechanism that's being followed is a question and boxes to tick in a very interactive way. So we've worked our way through it, and what we propose doing is, I've done it, it's sort of paused, ready to go, is sort of finding it helpful that there is a proposal, flagging that the committee is keen that the audit fees are kept under review, but it's very hard to come up with something alternative to this. In terms of the technical ones, I think we've been through that with other colleagues from other combined authorities and locally. I think generally there feels to be, it makes sense to try and curtail some of the pieces of audit work that are taking a long time to try and then help get a little bit of capacity back into the system. And I think a debate whether we need to overly engage with the proposals there. They seem straightforward and hopefully helpful to moving this on. So that's what's in the paper. Did circulate before the meeting an external audit update from Mazars. I think because of the timing of work underway and the meeting, we sort of crossed. So we've brought this to meeting. Alice will, I think, happily draw out any highlights in it. It's not what we usually get at this time of year because it's in an unusual world. So there's nothing hidden in there that we're trying to rush past you. And Alison can highlight key points in that and may have views on some of the other bits I've sort of jumped through. But happy for any questions, whether you want to let Alison speak and then between us take questions.
Shall we take questions on what Angela's just said first and then we'll pass across? Is that okay?
I'm more than happy to help.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm more than happy to help answer those because the consultations, as you can appreciate, is something that I've had daily conversations with audit committees on because all the audit committees are grappling with the same things, and I won't say I've got a well-rehearsed speech because it's not a rehearsed speech, but I'm probably in a good position to try and answer questions.
Good, thank you. Any members got any questions? No. I suppose when I read through the documents, I only read it once. I should probably have reread it because it's quite significant, wasn't it? But there's challenges, isn't there, in terms of getting us up to speed and getting figures that we can be confident in. And it talked about things like one report covering several years that focuses on significant weaknesses. And I thought, well, how can you know what the significant weaknesses are if you haven't done the pre-work? And then it talked about placing reliance and accuracy of opening balances. And again, if the work hasn't been done, how do you get that assurance? So I suppose what I was thinking, I know audit can't cover it all because that's the problem, isn't it? There isn't a resource there. But is there anything we can do internally to look at the risks that sit around this approach and make sure that we've mitigated any of the risks?
Briefly from me, I think it's been acknowledged through all of this, the only way through it is for auditors and auditees to work together about what we can do, what we feel comfortable doing, what the auditors do. Because I say, Alice is wrestling with this with multiple audit clients. We're doing it from our perspective. And I think we have got a session in next week to try and work through how we want to start approaching this. But Alison may have his well-rehearsed.
Yeah, I mean, I'll pick up both of those points because I think they're really they get to the nub of it. The first point on the multi-year reporting, that applies to the value for money work alone. That's something I am really keen to do because it's an efficient use of time and resource to try and catch up. So when I said earlier around aiming to report our value for money work in March, that is going to be bringing that up to the 31st of March 23 position for value for money, which then puts us in the position of doing your 23-24 value for money arrangements work in a more timely fashion. So we can report that to you. I'm not going to commit to the July meeting. It might not get done for the July meeting. The 22, 23 and 21-2 stuff will. But it will be as soon as possible, and definitely in advance of November, which is the proposed end date in the NAO's consultation. In terms of the significant weaknesses, so all that will be is we will be doing a piece of work that's looking at both years together and then doing a single report covering both years. There will probably have to be, for reasons I won't bore you with, a separation in the report between both years, but it will be very clear that it is one report to you, and it's giving you the position as at the end of 22-3, and not saying, oh, well, we've done something 18 months old now. In another year, we'll come back and tell you what 18 months ago was. That's not going to help anyone. So that's a really good, in my opinion, a really good way forward to help us catch up on the value for money side. You talked about the opening balances. This is, if I'm honest, this is a really difficult situation, and the consultation, however well worded and good it is, doesn't go into detail about the challenges and the problems that auditors are going to have in implementing this. Because if I'm auditing a balance at a particular point in time, I don't actually care what the year before and the year before that was, because I'm auditing at a point in time. But in local government, there's a very real issue around the value and the balance of your general fund and the working balances of any organisation in local government. And auditing in one year gives me no assurance that there aren't things in the previous years that have been rolled into that. And hence, there are no answers. I'm happy to take any questions you might have on any of the detail, but there are no answers to those questions at the moment, because that is the level of detail that my colleagues in Mazars and the other audit firms and DLUC, SIPFA, the NAO are all trying to grapple with is, what does this mean in practice? If we issue what is known as a disclaimer opinion because we haven't finished all the audit work on a set of accounts, what does that mean for next year? What does that mean for the year after? Because we can't be in a situation of having disclaimer opinions, qualified opinions in perpetuity just because in one year we didn't do enough work. So there are some real practical challenges, and we will need to come back to this committee, and I'll come back to this committee once that landscape is much clearer. Post-consultation, post those discussions, they're very real grappling issues, and they will impact on the combined authority. I'll make that absolutely clear. As Angela said, I haven't seen them, but she says that the accounts are now published, but they're only just published for 22-3. I won't be, because it's my first meeting, I'm not going to be overly defensive about the auditor issues here. There are audit resource issues. I don't face the same resource issues at Mazars that other firms are facing, and we can only audit a set of accounts that's available. So there are in the sector a number of challenges, and auditor resource is only one of those challenges. So we will, as I say, we'll be talking to Angela, starting that conversation next week as to what we think it might look like, and then post-consultation, once that gets published and we know what the position is, then we can plan very clearly as to what are we going to do on your 22-3 accounts by the end of September this year.
Thank you. So can this committee be cited on that, the progress of those discussions, and also the risks that sit around that? Because fundamentally that will impact all the decisions going forward, won't it? If we're making decisions based on a position that's, you know, maybe not accurate, it's tricky. So yeah.
I will definitely, one of the things I was going to say in my kind of intro was, I will bring a report to each of the meetings here. I don't know, because this is my first time coming to a meeting, my first time engaging and working with you at the Combined Authority, but I don't like verbal reports. I like to bring a written report that comes to your meeting so that you've got time to absorb it and understand it and raise questions to me, because that's an important part. So post-consultation, I will absolutely bring an update report that's really clear on what has happened, what it means, and what it means for the Combined Authority and my audit of your accounts.
Yeah, that's lovely, thank you. Okay, so do you want, oh sorry, Councillor Dacre. Yeah. No, it's okay.
So does it make it any easier that, if I'm understanding right, that your firm was responsible for the 21-22 accounts, so that at least when you come to the next set, you've got some idea of what's happened?
Yes, it does. There is a separate issue, and some of you, and Councillor Dacre, you are in this situation because I don't need to declare an interest, but I'm the appointed auditor for Calderdale going forward, and I came to your audit committee a couple of weeks ago and had this same discussion with them. There are challenges where audits are changing suppliers, and I'm inheriting a set of accounts that hasn't been audited. Thankfully, we don't need to worry about that in this room because we're not in that situation. I am reaping what I sow in my audit for 22-3 when it comes to 23-4. So I have a vested interest in making sure that I've done sufficient work on those unsigned years to make sure that I can give an unqualified opinion in the future years.
I think you've alluded to this earlier on anyway. You're always looking backwards anyway. In any audit, it's always backwards, and at the moment we're looking backwards and backwards and backwards. So from my perspective, and we see this within Kirklees, what we need is something which gives us the opportunity to learn quickly from what's been happening and address the financial challenges that we have now. Politically, for us as councillors, it's difficult because you'll get the opposition using something that was stated 2 years ago as if that's happening now, and because of this gap that causes issues. But I think the essential thing, and you would pointed this, is that is not obviously ignoring the what needs to be done, but how is it that we get to a point very as quickly as possible to have something which is useful and means something for the organisation in actually the financial direction, strategy, and actions that need to be taken. Otherwise, we're just going through, in many respects, an academic debate, which is, in my view, fairly pointless.
I would share those views from a personal perspective. There's two really important strands within the consultations and the joint statements that came with the consultations. One is that there is a statement around the rebuilding assurance. What does rebuilding assurance look like? There's a very clear intention, and the backstop dates are deliberately designed to both rebuild assurance and make sure that auditor reporting and authority reporting is on a timely basis. And that's part of that rebuilding assurance in the sector, because it's unsustainable and it's not appropriate that accounts are not signed off in a timely way. That's another of those questions where the consultation poses a question and the devil is going to be in the detail. What does rebuilding assurance mean? How is that going to work? And that's the thing that thankfully people with bigger brains than me and higher up the food chain than me are grappling across all the firms, is what is that going to look like? How is that going to work? And at what point have we rebuilt assurance? But I absolutely take the points. They're absolutely valid and right to make, yeah.
So I suppose from the point of view of that transparency to not an opposition in the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, but people who might be wanting to look, at least we can say that the draft financial statements are out there now. So it's not as if that is being hidden in any way and sitting around in the background waiting for external audit. It is out there for anybody who cares to try to make sense of it and raise questions on it, isn't it? And I think that's an important thing that sometimes gets lost in all of this discussion about internal audit, that what really does matter for this combined authority is that we have been able to put those statements in the public domain, and if you hadn't, then I think people could be genuinely concerned.
Can I just add to that? I think to conclude, they've gone out later than they would normally have. It's been a very odd year because I think this situation of the backlog sort of has almost crept up over the last year. And we've previously reported to the committee, we focused our attention on 21, 22. And once they were finished, then back to conclude 22, 23. In hindsight, possibly we should have tried to keep the two in tandem. And given what we now know, the plans are in place to do the close down for 23, 24 in the usual 3-month timescale. So I suspect we're going to be in a world of sitting down in the summer with the auditors with his 22, 23 and his 23, 24. How are we going to go about this? So I think, yes, they're out there now. The results for the year align with the management accounts that we reported back last summer. So we haven't changed our position in that timescale. So I think there is some assurance there. But I think just to say we are committing to ensure we're back in our usual run of things going forward from here on in, irrespective of what audit work does or doesn't happen. We'll separate the two and just keep on track as we've previously done.
Thank you. Any more questions on that? Okay, so Alistair, did you want to?
I will, because otherwise it looks a little odd that you've had a report passed out and I'm just going to gloss over it. So I'm not. I will do. In all honesty, I think those questions and the conversation has probably covered most of what, if not all of what I was going to say on the section 1. So there are 3 parts to the report, and if you're not familiar with the way that these reports are and how I like to report it, where we're not bringing a formal report like an audit plan or an audit completion report, I'd bring something like this, and so it sets out what's the progress with your audit in a section 1, and then in section 2 what else is going on in the sector that is of interest to you, that when you've got an electronic copy there's a hyperlink you can click and go and read an article from be it the NAO or DLUC or whoever, that I think is of interest and relevance and you might not have picked up on. I think in those conversations and discussions and questions I've probably covered all of what was in section 1, which was covering the consultation and the likely impact on the combined authority. It's looking at the value for money reporting and saying that we will have that finished for a multi-year by the end of March, and you'll get that before your next committee meeting. So the items in section 2, I'm more than happy to take any questions on any of it, Chair. But I don't think there's anything that I want to especially draw out as worthy of mention to you. But happy to take any supplementaries, appreciating that you've only just seen it, so you probably don't have any detailed questions.
That's that. Has anybody got any questions? I haven't, because I haven't had a chance to digest it. But
can I just say as a follow-up, if there are any subsequent to the meeting, feel free to contact me outside of the meeting. If there are any questions that you've got and you want me to pick up on, please do. Either through Angela or my email address is in there directly. Feel free to. Happy to pick up outside of the meeting questions.
lovely, thank you,
And
Angela.
we'll forward the paper electronically so you can follow those links for those of you who wish to do so.
That's good. Thank you very much. Okay, so if there's nothing else on that, we'll move on to agenda item 9, and that's the update on Treasury Management. I think that's Angela.
It is nothing hugely different to report from last time. We had talked previously about the changes in some of the performance indicators and some of the enhanced reporting required to comply with requirements. I think there was discussion the committee wanted some further training, and we have been in discussions with our Treasury advisors, so Leeds Council are happy to do that. And given the timing, they're unable to fit it in at the moment. We suggest we do it in the summer when we're aware of who is going to be on this committee, and we'll do it as part of the getting the committee up and running again in the new municipal year. In the meantime, not a lot has changed. We're still carrying some cash balances. we are looking at an opportunity to potentially repay some debt prematurely, which will yield some shorter term savings. But beyond that, it is a bit of business as usual on the Treasury side. We have recommitted to bringing all the Treasury arrangements together. It's been a piece of work on our agenda. It's been pushed aside a little bit whilst we've put the new finance system in, but we're hoping to pick that up again and just bring all that under one roof rather than it be shared. It will make it more efficient for us. But otherwise, happy to take questions. Is there anything I've missed, Gary?
I don't think so. I think the only other thing to say is that the strategy hasn't changed over the last year. We're looking to internalise our cash balances as much as we possibly can, which will reduce the need for borrowing as far as we can, which has two benefits. One, it reduces our counterparty risk of investment, and it also reduces our risk of interest rate fluctuations. So that's basically where we are, I think, in terms of the strategy.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Just a request on presentation. You couldn't possibly just put a paragraph of narrative under the graph, could you? Just say flicking backwards and forwards. Thank you. Okay, so move on to agenda item 10. That's to consider any changes to the internal control and receive an update on the regulatory requirements and internal controls. So is that Caroline? Thank you.
It is, thank you, Chair. This is a report that I think it's its third iteration in this form with a dashboard to this committee now. So hopefully there's it's starting to look a little more familiar in terms of the content. The cover report seeks to pull out some of the key points to draw to your attention, but there may be other aspects that members want to raise queries or comments on. I suppose in terms of our internal, what's happened internally since our last meeting, I think we reported last time on the CI Anywhere, which was implemented on the 13th of November, which is our integrated finance, HR and payroll system. That's obviously going through, it's not a big, a one hit and it's all in, so that is going through its implementation phases. And as the report says at 2.3, we're looking forward, there's an officer steering group looking to implement a learning management and talent management module in 2024. So that very much ties in with our workforce development plans as part of that. The report then goes on to highlight some of the key matters to be drawn from the dashboard. The first one there is on ICT and highlighting the fact that we were the target of multiple distributed denial of service attacks on our public-facing journey planning website in November, in the autumn. I think we had our head of ICT here at our last meeting, so I think there was an opportunity to be verbally updated on that. But this sets out some more of the detail around that. And I think it was confirmed at the last meeting that we do have a new cyber security manager in post, so that is a key move forward for us, I think, in terms of that. I just wanted to flag under health and safety and confirms there's been no RIDORs over the last 2 years, but it does highlight there at 2.6.5 that the beginning of January the authority took the precautionary measure to close Bradford Interchange bus station to safeguard public safety. And as many of you will know, that the interchange remains closed at the present time whilst survey work and other reviews are undertaken there. There is a temporary bus station solution in place, and that is monitored, that is kept under close review and monitoring by our Transport Directorate, and we are working very closely with Bradford Council in terms of trying to minimise and to, the disruption that flows from that, and to make sure we've got joint plans in place. Train services remain unaffected by that, but it was important to bring it to this committee's attention. I don't think there's nothing significant else that I would draw to your attention from that. I mean, the information is in the report there. We do have, I'll turn to Gary in a moment in terms of the financial update element of this. But I don't know whether members want. Would you prefer me, Chair, to pause at that point in terms of the dashboard?
Yeah,
and
that's
deal with
fine.
the
We'll take
finance
questions there
as a
and then go on
second
to
part.
finance.
Thank you.
Yes. Members, any questions on the dashboard? No, shall I start then? Sorry, as usual. There was a strange comment in there. I just wondered if you could just expand on it about reduction in complaints since schools went back. Is there a trend? Is there a pattern?
Yeah.
Time of year or something?
Yes, I
around
think,
that?
Chair, the last dashboard that came showed a spike in complaints, and it's a cycle. It happens every September, I think, when the schools go back, and there's lots of queries and complaints around new bus arrangements, things for the passage of school children. So we hit the Transport Directorate, get a spike of queries and complaints. It all settles down, everybody gets to know what they're doing, and then the complaints subside again.
Okay, that makes
So-
sense. Yes.
So in January, when we said, oh, this spike is due to that and it will drop, and it has since dropped. So
Right,
that
thank you.
was that.
Okay. With regards to the cyber attacks, does our insurance cover us against any aspect of cyber attacks? And if so, are we compliant with any conditions? I know some do and some don't.
We haven't. We don't carry cybersecurity insurance. I think it's just getting. I think it's just getting
Prohibitively
Pre-
expensive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have looked into it, but it just doesn't keep up with. I think it's just one of those areas where, as you say, it would constantly be changing, and that insurance would be out of date. But no, it's not something we carry.
Yeah. Okay, just wondering that. And then the final question from me is about core committees. That position is looking to get increasingly challenging, isn't it? With the numbers are going up for the number of in-court committees, and I'm just very concerned really about the impact, because if we don't have court committees, we're probably not getting the right challenge at the right meetings. Is there anything that is being done about that?
We've an element of our in-court committees are around our scrutiny committees, and of course, as you know, Chair, a review has just been undertaken by the scrutiny members themselves as part of a working group to look at how we implement the government scrutiny protocol, and one of the recommendations in there is that we move to a single committee as opposed to the three committees we currently have. So that is, I'm just looking at Councillor Anderson, that is something which will be coming to the overview, the Corporate Scrutiny Committee at its meeting tomorrow for consideration, and is before the Combined Authority next week. But we do hope, well, we not just hope, we are aiming to look at the measures we put in place, not just about how many committees, but the other measures we put in place around supporting members, making it, I suppose, just looking at the profile of that and how we can make it more engaging and increase quorum for that. So there's a number of measures around scrutiny committee which we're looking to develop. And I think that has been one of the three committees in particular has been difficult to ensure the quoracy of. But we have had other in-court meetings as well. And I think we have to, we do need to, it's a really tricky one because a lot of our members do travel some distance to come to these meetings. There are various reasons why the quoracy issue remains a challenge for us. And I think we just need to look at how we can best engage with members in terms of setting the calendar of meetings as far as we can, although that is often inevitably tricky around diaries, but how can we do something, how can we get the time of meetings to make sure we have the best chance of getting that quoracy. So I think it is an ongoing challenge for us, but again we'll need to keep that under review this year.
Is there anything we can learn from any other combined authorities? I mean, are we unusual in this respect? Is it a common problem? What are others doing about it?
It is a common problem, and I think during the pandemic when combined authorities ran meetings it was all virtual, wasn't it? The quoracy issue, of course, wasn't a problem. It wasn't the need to engage. It was actually the practicalities of people all being able to come together at certain times. So we're not alone. My counterparts in other combined authorities, we regularly have these conversations about what can we do. But it's not unusual because it's we're over that wider geography, and it brings its challenges. But we do continue. We've got a developing network, I think, over combined authorities in terms of sharing best practice. So it is one of the things we continue to review.
Okay, thank you. So should we move on to the finance aspects?
Thank you, Chair. So the revenue position at the end of Q3 is broadly in line with budget as it was at the end of Q2, both showing a small net surplus. You will notice there are variations between income and expenditure lines, as I previously explained. That is mainly due to timing of income and expenditure against a budget that is phased in 12ths. So there's always a mismatch there. What we will be doing is phasing budget more appropriately from next financial year. So those timings should go away. In terms of capital spend, the spend at Q3 is very much in line with what we've experienced in previous years. So there is always a ramp up over the last quarter of the financial year. So we are confident that the full year forecast will be hit.
Thank you. Any questions on that? No. Okay. Thank you. So note we've had an update on that, and that takes us to our final agenda item, which is corporate risk. And just a reminder on this one, it's been agreed that public be excluded during consideration of Appendix 2. So if we can just consider the cover paper and Appendix 1, please. And who's taking that one?
That's me, Chair. Thank you. Sorry, Chair, to hand over. We tried to get you a larger scale size of Appendix 2. It's still very, very tiny because it's a PDF. So I think it's one of those documents that's easy to see on screen because you can do the clever, you can zoom it in, but it's a bit wretched as a hard copy. However, I digress. So we have the risk item here, and members have in front of them at Appendix 1 a copy of the corporate risk register, snapshot from when that was done for this meeting, together with Appendix 2, which has the elements of that have been redacted, together with the action plan. So as the report says, one new risk has been added to our corporate risk register since the committee last saw this, and that's generally in relation to security. So that is sort of around people and assets. And as I say there, we've got the detail of that in exempt Appendix 2. I would say it is really, I think it's reflecting, it's probably a precautionary risk identified on there to ensure that we sort of focus on the mitigations, and it's a recognition of what we're seeing in terms of the national picture, more so than anything specific that's happened here in terms of the need to put that on. We have 12 risks currently on the risk register, 2 medium, 9 high and 1 very high, and the very high risk remains the one relating to cyber security, which has been there throughout. We set out in section 2.7 onwards the risks, those risks where we believe the rating will reduce from high to medium following completion of all the mitigations that we put in place. And they're literally drawn out, they're extracts from the corporate risk register, which are probably more easily read in the risk register themselves, I think. And one of the risks on the risk register which is corporate risk number 11, you'll see on there, relates to bus reform. And I just wanted to highlight to the committee, this was a risk relating to the need to make sure we had the right resources in place to get the proposal to a point at which the mayor could make a decision as to whether to proceed with making a franchising scheme or for us to look at an alternative proposal. That decision is intended to be made at a meeting of the combined authority next Thursday. So that risk, that risk will then be the narrative around that. It will be reviewed, obviously, and updated in terms of where that takes us for the next phase. So that will be a future change that members will see on this risk register. So I shall stop there because it's probably more productive to answer any questions that members have. Thank you.
Any questions from anyone on the risk register? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the risk register, I can see there are a couple of items that are actually listed as issues rather than risk. Are these actually occurring now? It's CR 005 and 7.
Yes, they are. But we treat them like risks because we need to activate mitigations in response to them. But they are, the first one, which is 5, is an ongoing issue around the funding landscape across local government and instability in the political climate, and the fact that because of the way combined authorities are funded, it's very difficult to plan a long way in advance. So that is an issue. And then the second one, 7, is about the funding situation in the bus market. So yes, it is an issue. We took a view, because you can get very purist about these things, about, is something a risk or is it an issue? Sometimes it's both. It's an ongoing issue that carries on, that you treat like a risk, and so that's why we've kept it in one place for simplicity for it, really. Okay.
Sorry, another question. It mentioned at the top of the paper that the risk register has been reviewed and the date of the last reviews on the register. Could I just ask what that involves, other than the risk owner and the sponsor? Is there anybody sort of independent from that business area that's involved who actually looks at what mitigations are proposed? Are they actually effective? Are they the right mitigations?
Yeah.
So the risk register initially is reviewed by the owner, as you suggest, but then the entire risk register then goes to the whole of the leadership team, and it formally comes to our internal leadership board, where we consider it, and directors challenge each other around the extent to which the mitigations are appropriate, and that's about the content, but it's also about the process, which has led to the bit on the right hand side of the risk register being added about the kind of the assumed future risk rating once the mitigations have been put in place. So yes, there is a kind of cross colleague challenge. The next point, of course, is to bring it here, where it's then challenged, and you can challenge us as to whether you think the mitigations are appropriate or otherwise. And then the final thing to add is that, in a slightly similar position to Bron's statement at the beginning about her having a business case for internal audit, similarly Caroline has a business case around bolstering our capacity for risk management, given the scale of the public funding that the organisation is now responsible for and the scaling up of our major programmes.
So can I just pick you up on what you just said then? So the likelihood following mitigation, you just said that's when things are put in place. So those things aren't in place at this point in time, is that right?
That's correct. So the column which is headed existing mitigations, which is kind of in the middle, just before you get to the coloured rating, that's stuff that we've already done. That then results in the current level of rating. And then there's a further column, which is further mitigations, and those are things which are either in train or haven't been completed yet. And then we go into once those things are complete, then the next colour column is our expected rating. So the things that are we could number the columns, but the column which says further mitigations, including dates of actions, those are things that are either in progress or need to be done but aren't complete yet.
So that makes complete sense. So in terms of this committee and getting assurance that those actions are being implemented and they're not just sitting there on a risk register as a to-do list that's not getting done, how do we get that level of assurance?
So we have done that for the very high risk, which is in the appendix. We haven't done it with the others. So the very, sorry, I'm about to go into the private appendix.
Okay, right.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Okay, we shall come back to that one another time.
Yeah.
I just think it's important that if those are if that's your to-do list around risk management, then we need to know how that is progressing for all of your top 10 or whatever it is risks.
Indeed, and the idea is that you move things from that column over to the left.
Yeah.
And then they appear on the left-hand side. You're right, we haven't presented to the committee an action plan that goes into the dates when all of the litigations will be in place. We have done that for where there are very high risks, and it just so happens that the very high risk that we've done it for is also in the exempt appendix. That said, if a very high risk if we were to assess a risk as very high in the future, the intention would then be to put together the action plan and show it to the committee in more detail in the same way. Okay. The risk that's very high is exempt because of its nature, the subject, not because it's a very high risk.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Okay, if there's no more questions on that, then if we can move. Oh, sorry, Councillor Dacre.
It wasn't a question so much as a comment on what you'd said about how it's easier to follow in the risk register. And it was. I didn't find the text where it just had this bit pulled out at all helpful.
No,
it was much better to be able to see it as it moved along.
I think you're correct. I think you're correct. I think future iterations we won't include that.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, could I just also say that presumably when you're talking about the way you, Chair, are talking about how do we know that it's being done, presumably to some extent because this would come back again, and therefore we would see whether actually it was now.
We will, but I'm thinking is this something to make it easier for this committee to recognise that, otherwise we might find ourselves having to refer to previous papers to sort of see the progress and track it through.
Chair, we'll give that some thought. I think the intention has always been there to expand the action plan across the other risks, and we started with a very high risk. But you're right, we've got a little bit of time to do it before the next committee is to look at how we can actually make that easier for this committee to readily track. I'll take that away.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Davis.
It's a question. When we get on to the exempt side, so it's okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. If that's all the questions on that, if we can call this part of the meeting to a close and move to private session.